Hi everyone, David Aragona here with another edition of the TimeformUS Road to the Derby series. On Saturday at Aqueduct, the feature race is the Grade 3 Gotham, going the one-turn mile distance, race 10 on their 10-race card, and we've drawn a 13-horse field for this Gotham, and that's been a theme for this race recently. Not always the most impactful Derby prep in terms of having implications for the first Saturday in May, but the Gotham consistently draws a really interesting field of horses turning back in distance, stretching out, new faces stepping up against Stakes Company for the first time, and this race really does have it all. The number 10, Just a Touch, is one of 4 Brad Cox trainees in this race, and I did peg him as the 5-2 morning line favorite. He was really impressive on debut at Fairgrounds and feels like a horse that's coming into this Gotham with quite a bit of hype surrounding him, but there are other horses coming off maiden wins that have also shown promise, some horses coming out of the withers. This Gotham really is an intriguing race to handicap and an enticing race from a wagering standpoint. Let's take a look at the TimeformUS pace projector before we get into the main contenders, and that morning line favorite, the number 10, Just the Touch, did show plenty of speed in his debut race, though did sit just off another horse in second before taking over, and given that he's drawn towards the outside, I wonder if he'll try to take back just off the pace in here under Florent Giroux. There are others who want to be on the lead in this race, like the number 2, Maximus Meridius, the number 7, El Grandeo, has shown plenty of front-running speed in prior starts, but especially the number 12, Slider, who's stretching out from sprint races coming in from California. That horse has a ton of early speed, and I would not be surprised if Jose Lezcano was looking to get to the front and cross over in the early stages. If the pace really falls apart, do note that a horse who's not even shown in the pace projector, the number 13, Capital Idea, gets the LP flag, indicating he has the highest TimeformUS late pace rating in the field. Well, let's go through this Gotham field in post position order, beginning with the number 1, Canate, who is a long shot in this race. I pegged him at 30-1 on the line. He was the 5th place finisher at a big price in the Withers last month for trainer Todd Pletcher, and he's run okay in a couple of these New York prep races, but the Gotham is just coming up as a much deeper race overall than both the Withers and the Jerome. The best thing I can say about Canate is that he was wide against a rail bias last time on February 3rd, Withers Day, never towards the inside that day, and he was just fading towards the end like a horse that might not really want to go the mile and an eighth. Turning back a little bit does help him, but it just feels like others in this race might have a bit more upside than he does. Number 2 is Maximus Meridius, and he's a horse coming in from Parks for trainer Butch Reed, and we've seen this trainer have a lot of success sending horses in from the Parks base to New York, especially against Stakes Company, and this guy hasn't done that much wrong in his 3 starts in Pennsylvania. His only loss came in that optional claiming race 2 back behind Frankie's Empire, who has turned out to be pretty good. That horse came back out of that race to win a stakes down in Florida against the tougher field, so the form of that race is strong. Not so sure about the last race where he won in the mud pretty decisively, but really wasn't beating too much that day. So he is stepping way up in class as he tries Stakes Company for the first time and also stretching out to the 1 mile distance. It remains to be seen if this is a horse that really wants to go this far, but at the very least, he does figure to be part of the pace in this Gotham. The number 3 is Deterministic, and we'll take a look at his only start, which came all the way back in the summer of last year at Saratoga, but it was a memorable debut because this horse took some money that day to go off at 7-2, had things go wrong right from the start, broke a little bit slowly, was squeezed towards the back of the pack, had to loop the field around the far turn, was even a little green at the top of the stretch. You saw him bumping into a rival that he'll actually meet again here in the Gotham, but he straightens himself out and is able to get up to win over the long shot Hurricane Nelson this day, a horse who did come back after this to run some nice speed figures, legitimizing the performance of Deterministic. Now, he had a setback after that, has been off for a long time, and Christophe Clement, the connections, have picked a pretty tough spot for him to return from the layoff in this Gotham, but he appears to be working well down at Payson Park. Actually, his workmate in many of those recent drills was the New York-bred Pandagate, who was an impressive winner of the Gander last weekend. So it feels like Deterministic is coming back as an improved horse as a 3-year-old. We'll just see if he can handle this big class test off the long layoff. Number 4 is Facenda. He is a Doug O'Neill trainee that's coming in as a big long shot in this race. He made his debut against maiden optional claimers at Turf Paradise. Really was not facing any rivals that are in the same league as those that he'll be meeting here. Did go off at as a very heavy favorite that day, 4-5, and just barely got the job done and grinding out the victory from the inside position. But he's going to have to step way up with a much faster speed figure if he'll be competitive with this field. I suppose he's another one that could be involved in the pace, but unlikely to be around late. The number 5, Deposition, is yet another horse that I've got pegged at 50-1 on the morning line in this race. He was a big price last time out in the Withers and actually picked up some pieces to finish a decent 4th that day, but he got a better trip than some other horses that are exiting that Withers coming back into here because he was towards the inside for the majority of his trip. And like I was saying with regard to Kanate, he's a horse that the February 3rd, rather, was a day where you really did want to be riding that rail for as long as possible. There was a strong inside bias that day, and Deposition really only angled outside for the stretch drive and was simply picking up pieces at the end in a race that was starting to come apart. So don't want to upgrade him too much. I suppose he'll be running on at the end if this race comes apart a little bit, but it feels like this is a tougher race than the stakes he encountered last time. The number 6 is Air Cav, who figures to be the biggest price of the Brad Cox trainees in this race, and justifiably so, because he really has not been competitive in his 2 prior starts against Stakes Company. He was trying some pretty tough rivals when he stepped up against Grade 1 competition in the Champagne at the end of last year, but really was no match for the likes of Timberlake, General Partner, or some others that were more successful in that race. Came off the layoff last time in the Jimmy Winkfield and was no match for stablemate Bergen, who's back in here finishing a dozen lengths behind that rival. He's going to press on trying these tougher spots, but feels like this would be a big reach for Air Cav. Number 7 is El Grandeo, and we'll take a look at the stretch run of that Withers because El Grandeo almost got the job done this day, but he really did have all the best of it from a trip and race dynamic standpoint because the pace really was not particularly fast. He looked like the lone speed on paper, got to share the lead through rated fractions and spurts away in mid-stretch here, but does so while hugging that inside path. And like I've been saying, February 3rd was a day where he really did want to stay down towards the inside, and he just loses by a nose to Uncle Heavy, who gets the job done. But that horse ran a much better race than El Grandeo did because he was never towards the inside and still was able to get up for the victory. El Grandeo probably will appreciate the slight turn back in distance, getting back to a mile here because I think a mile and 1/8 was really stretching his stamina beyond the limit last time. And he's run some nice speed figures, including 2-back when he got a 1:13 in the Jerome. That's one of the best numbers that anybody in this field has earned. I just wonder if he has the upside to continue that forward progression given how many starts he's had. This will be the 11th race of his career, and there just feels like some others that do have a little bit more improvement in them than El Grandeo does. The number 8 is Bergen, yet another of these Brad Cox trainees in the Gotham. We'll take a look at his most recent start when he was a stakes winner at Aqueduct in the Jimmy Winkfield, going the 6 furlong distance over a muddy sealed track. And you do want to note the fact this horse handled a muddy surface at Aqueduct because there is rain in the forecast for this Saturday in South Ozone Park. So he could encounter a very similar going on Saturday in the Gotham. He tried the 1 mile distance once last year as a 2-year-old at Churchill Downs. That was the only loss of his career so far, but I thought he ran pretty well in that optional claiming race, was towards the back early. There was some pace ahead of him, but he was really finishing well behind Houdet, who was an undefeated horse coming into that race and kept his unbeaten record intact. But Bergen was by far finishing best of all at the end that day. He's a strong finisher who is going to be rallying from off the pace in this spot. I don't really view him as one that is going to be competitive as the distances get further, stretching out the 2 turns down the line. But that doesn't matter for Saturday. It does feel like he is a horse that fits the 1 turn mile distance of this Gotham pretty well, especially if pace develops ahead of him. The number 9 is Eliminate, and we'll take a look at his most recent victory when he broke his maiden in the 4th start of his career, going the 6.5 furlong distance at Aqueduct. And he was not beating the toughest field this day. The runner-up, Laser Sharp, was coming out of a maiden claiming race on debut, and that horse really did take a step forward for the John Terranova barn, who seemed like everything out of that stable was running at this point in time, and that horse really gave Eliminate a challenge through the stretch. But you could see Eliminate always has that one measured as he comes onto the wire to win, going the 6.5 furlong distance, which arguably is a little bit short for this son of Curlin. This guy really strikes me as one that is going to like the 1 turn mile distance. Even though he's by Curlin, his dam was a pure sprinter, so stretching him all the way out to the 2 turn mile and 1/8 in the 2nd and 3rd starts of his career might have just been a little bit too much to ask of this horse from a stamina standpoint. He actually ran pretty well in that race 2-back because he broke a little bit slowly, never had great position behind a rated pace, and really was never clear on the stretch to make a late run. I thought he took a step forward on the turn back last time. To me, he is a 1 turn horse, and he figures to get the right kind of trip in this race. And going all the way back to his career debut, he was in that same first start as the Deterministic, but that was actually the one that was getting bumped around by that foe at the top of the stretch. I think this horse has some ability, and maybe he's going to be the right kind of price in this race. The number 10 is Just a Touch, who is that favorite on the morning line. And he got a big speed figure on debut. You can see a 113 final time rating, which translated to a 111 TimeformUS speed figure with the F notation. And that's put in by my colleague Craig Mulkowski, who makes the TimeformUS speed figures. The F next to the speed figure indicates that it's a number that you might not have full confidence in because it was a race that featured primarily first-time starters. So there's not that much prior form to compare the number 2 for the participants in that race, but it did feel like a very fast race. We've already seen a couple of runbacks out of that race, one in particular who was contesting the pace along with Just a Touch, who came back to win and improve his next start. So that feels like a legitimate performance. And even though Just a Touch won going 6 furlongs, he definitely gives off the vibe of a horse that is going to appreciate added ground, being a son of Justify who has a lot of length and scope to his frame. There's stamina on the bottom side of this pedigree, and he's definitely an exciting prospect coming into this Gotham for trainer Brad Cox. But you have to ask yourself, how short of a price is too short a price on a horse that is likely going to be the favorite in a very wide open competitive field. The number 11 is Lightline, who is the last of the 4 Brad Cox trainees in this race, drawn in post 11. And he's coming out of the Withers, and he was the beaten favorite that day, going off as the even money favorite. A little disappointing that he was only able to finish third behind Uncle Heavy El Grandeo, but he was also, like the winner of the race, never inside, was in the 2 path early, then the 3 path around the far turn, and was staying on at one pace at the end of that race, never really finishing as strongly as the eventual winner. He had run well in some races prior to that, particularly 2-back, when he launched a big run around the far turn at Oaklawn to fall short 4 lengths behind Carbone that day. Now, you can ask yourself in retrospect, how strong was that race? Because Carbone has come back since then to sort of disappoint mildly in a couple of Derby preps at Oaklawn Park. So maybe that race doesn't look quite as strong in retrospect as it did at the time. But I do think Lightline is a horse that could appreciate turning back to a 1-turn mile as a horse who will appreciate some pace to close into here. The number 12 is Slider, and he is a horse coming in from California to contest this Gotham. Will be stretching out to a wrap distance for the first time after having never gone beyond 7 furlongs in his prior starts. They really did peg him as a sprinter during his 2-year-old season, and they actually moved him to turf just to keep him at sprint distances, trying the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint, where he didn't even run that badly after chasing the pace going wide around the turn that day. They switched him back to turf last time in the San Vicente. Almost just no match for one of the powerful 3-year-olds from the Bob Baffert stable in Muth, but he did finish gamely that day to try to come back for second at the end. I don't view him as a horse that is going to be getting better with added distance, but perhaps the 1-turn mile could be within his scope, and he definitely has run speed figures in the past that make him competitive here. And then closing out the field on the far outside is the number 13, Capital Idea. We'll take a look at his maiden victory last time out at Aqueduct, notably over a sloppy track. And like I've been saying, he could catch a very similar track on Saturday at Aqueduct with rain in the forecast. That clearly is not going to bother this horse at all. And this was a big step forward for him, all the way up to earning a 106 TimeformUS speed figure. That number makes him very competitive against this field. I do think you can question the quality of the field he was beating a little bit, because the runner-up Sardi's did come back in a maiden race last weekend at Aqueduct and disappointed, regressing significantly from a speed figure standpoint. But Capital Idea was just better than that foe on this last occasion. You could see all blue color-coded fractions for that race, and he was sitting off those dueling leaders before taking over in the stretch and really finishing powerfully to the wire. I also thought he showed some likable attributes on debut, raiding in a pocket behind horses and then coming through between horses in traffic at the end. So I think this horse has shown some progression from start 1 to start 2. Potentially there's more improvement there, and he does figure to get the right kind of pace set up ahead of him, and he's definitely the less regarded of the 2 Christophe Clement trainees in this race, so he does figure to be a better price than stablemate Deterministic. Well, let's throw up my picks for this wide open edition of the Grade 3 Gotham, and you'll see I did not include the number 10 Just a Touch in my picks. He probably is the most likely winner of this race, but I just don't think he's going to be a bettable price in this spot, so I wanted to look for some horses that will be better value, and for me, the best value of this field is the number 9 Eliminate. I think this horse is really going to appreciate the 1-turn mile distance. I think he's shown some hints of ability along the way, racing his way through maiden events, and I think he's got a little better to offer than we saw from him last night when he broke through against a weaker field at Aqueduct. I just think he's going to be the right kind of price in this race. I picked him at 15-1 on the morning line. I've also got the number 3 Deterministic in there. Very intrigued to see how he comes back, as well as the number 8 Birkin and the number 13 Capital Idea. But the number 9 Eliminate is my top pick in the Grade 3 Gotham on Saturday at Aqueduct. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.